This story is not in history textbooks because it is too terrifying. History does not always tell the truth. When we open history books, we see names, dates, battles, kings, empires, victories. But there is something missing: silence. Because history is not only made of what is written, history is also made of what is never written at all. And sometimes the most horrifying events are hidden not because they are unimportant, but because they are unbearable. Ask yourself this: why do some years in history feel empty? Why do some events are described in a single vague sentence? Why do historians say things like, records are missing, details are unclear, or the cause remains unknown? Is it really because nobody knew? Or because someone did not want it known? Because not every truth is safe to tell. Some truths create fear, some truths destroy reputations, some truths shake entire nations. And history, especially official history, does not like to shake itself. The hidden horrors of history often begin the same way. A quiet night, no witnesses, no cameras, no records. Then suddenly, a village disappears. A building is sealed forever. A group of people is relocated and never seen again. No trials, no funerals, no explanations. The archives are silent, the documents are missing, and the witnesses either disappear or learn to stay quiet. So history writes a single word: unknown. But unknown does not mean nothing happened. Sometimes it only means do not ask. Official history belongs to the powerful. It is written by victors, approved by rulers, edited by institutions. But memory belongs to the people, and people remember different things. They remember doors knocked on at night. They remember footsteps in dark hallways. They remember neighbors who vanished by morning. They remember places nobody wanted to talk about. And when children asked questions, they were told, don't talk about that. Don't go there. Don't mention those names. And fear was passed down, not through books, but through silence. Some of the most terrifying historical events were never written in blood. They were written in absence. People were there, then they weren't. Homes were full, then empty. And history explained it away with a word that hides everything: disappeared. But disappearances are rarely accidents. Sometimes they are organized, planned, erased, because erasing people is easier than explaining them. This is not a video about fantasy. There are no monsters here, no demons, no supernatural creatures. The horror in this story is human. It is the horror of power protecting itself, the horror of truth being buried, the horror of silence becoming official policy. It is the horror of knowing that something terrible happened, and the world agreed to forget it. In this video, we will not follow textbooks. We will follow gaps. We will follow whispers, forgotten testimonies, banned records, places with no explanations. Because history does not always lie. Sometimes, it simply refuses to speak. So ask yourself this: if history could talk, what would it be most ashamed of? Are you ready to hear the stories that were never meant to survive? Because the hidden horrors of history are not myths. They are not legends. They are the stories that were never allowed to be written. And once you hear them, you will never read history the same way again. In the late 16th century, England tried to do something bold. It tried to build a future in a land it barely understood. A small group of settlers arrived on an island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. The place was called Roanoke. It was meant to be a beginning. It became a question. In 1587, more than 100 men, women, and children settled there. They built homes. They planted crops. They believed help would return. Their governor, John White, left the colony to bring supplies from England. He promised to come back quickly, but history had other plans. England went to war with Spain, ships were seized, sailors were taken, and John White was delayed for 3 long years. 3 years of silence. 3 years without contact. 3 years without answers. When White finally returned to Roanoke in 1590, the colony was gone. Not damaged, not burned, not destroyed. Gone. The houses were dismantled carefully, not smashed, not looted. There were no bodies, no graves, no signs of violence, no signs of battle, no blood, nothing. It was as if the people had simply stood up and walked away, together. The only clue left behind was a word, carved into a wooden post. One word, Croatoan. No explanation, no message. Just that name, the name of a nearby island, and then silence. White searched desperately. He found no tracks, no camps, no survivors. A storm forced him to leave, and he never returned again. The colonists were never seen again. Not one, not a child, not an adult, not a body. History calls this event the Lost Colony. But that name hides the fear, because colonies do not simply disappear. People leave traces, they leave mistakes, they leave bones. Roanoke left nothing. Over the centuries, theories appeared. Some say the settlers joined local native tribes. Some say they were killed. Some say famine forced them to scatter. Some say disease wiped them out. But there is one problem. None of these theories explain the silence. If they were attacked, where are the bodies? If they moved, why leave no trail? If they joined others, why was there never a confirmed survivor? Why did history never find a single answer? And then comes the most disturbing thought. What if Roanoke wasn't destroyed, but erased? What if something happened that no one wanted written down? What if the truth was too dangerous, too embarrassing, too frightening for a growing empire? Because early colonial history was not kind. It was violent, chaotic, uncontrolled. Mistakes were buried, failures were forgotten, and sometimes entire communities were written out of existence. Roanoke remains unsolved to this day. No official conclusion, no final answer, only a name carved into wood and a question carved into history. So ask yourself this: how does an entire village vanish without leaving a single body? And why, after more than 400 years, does history still have nothing to say? Because some stories were never meant to be found, and Roanoke may be one of them. In history, some crimes are hidden by silence. Others are hidden by lies. But the most terrifying ones are hidden by both. And Katyn Forest is one of them. In the spring of 1940, thousands of Polish officers disappeared. They were not soldiers on a battlefield. They were prisoners, captured after the Soviet invasion of Poland. Educated men, doctors, lawyers, teachers, military officers, the backbone of a nation. They were taken away quietly. No trials, no announcements, no public records. Families waited. Weeks passed, then months, then years, and no answers came. In 1943, mass graves were discovered in a forest near Smolensk. The place was called Katyn. Inside the soil were thousands of bodies, hands tied, bullets in the back of the head, execution-style killings, systematic, organized, cold. The evidence was clear. The victims were Polish officers. The time of death pointed to 1940, and the weapons used were Soviet. But the truth was immediately buried. The Soviet Union denied everything. Instead, they blamed Nazi Germany. They said the killings happened later. They said the Germans were responsible. And here is where the real horror begins. Much of the world accepted the lie, not because it was convincing, but because it was convenient. World War II was still raging. The Soviet Union was an ally, and allies were not questioned. Governments stayed silent. Investigations were blocked. Documents were sealed. Families were told nothing. And for decades, the official version remained unchanged. Imagine what that meant. Imagine knowing your father was taken away and being told his killers were someone else. Imagine knowing the truth, but being forced to pretend you didn't, because saying the wrong thing meant prison. Or worse, in Poland, Katyn became a forbidden word. Mentioning it could destroy your life. Books were censored, teachers were silenced, history was rewritten, and an entire nation was forced to live with a lie. The most disturbing question is not who pulled the trigger. That part is clear. The question is, who stayed silent? Who saw the evidence and looked away? Who knew the truth but chose politics over justice? Who decided that thousands of murdered men were a price worth paying? It was not until 1990, almost 50 years later, that the Soviet government finally admitted the truth. They confessed. They released documents. They acknowledged responsibility. But by then, generations had passed. Mothers had died waiting. Children had grown old without answers. And the men of Katyn had been buried twice, once in the forest and once in history. Katyn Forest is not just a massacre. It is a lesson about power, about fear, about how truth can be delayed, but never erased. And it leaves us with one final question. How many other Katyns exist in history, where the crime is known, but the silence is still alive? Because sometimes the dead are not the only victims. Sometimes the truth is executed too. Just a short distance from Venice, there is an island that does not appear in tourist guides, an island boats avoid, an island locals refuse to talk about, an island with a single reputation. No one comes back from Poveglia. For centuries, Poveglia Island was not a place of life. It was a place of removal. When the Black Death swept through Europe, Venice made a decision, a brutal one. Anyone suspected of plague was taken away, not to be cured, but to be isolated. And Poveglia became that place. Ships arrived filled with the sick, the dying, the terrified. Families were torn apart. People were dragged from their homes and dumped on the island. Many were still alive. Many were not even infected. But once you were sent to Poveglia, you were already considered dead. Thousands died there, some from disease, some from starvation, some from despair. Bodies were burned constantly. The air was filled with smoke. The ground absorbed ash, blood, and suffering. It is said that even today, much of the island's soil is made of human remains. But the story does not end with the plague. That was only the beginning. In the 20th century, Poveglia was used again, this time as a mental hospital. And that is where the island's reputation became truly terrifying. Patients reported screams at night, whispers, figures watching from empty rooms. Doctors ignored them, or worse, encouraged their fear. There is a legend about one doctor in particular, a man who performed experiments, unethical procedures, treatments meant to control, not heal. Patients were not people. They were subjects. According to local stories, the doctor began to hear voices himself. He claimed the island was speaking to him, that the dead were watching, that they were angry. And one night, he climbed to the top of the hospital tower and threw himself off. Some say he died instantly. Others say he survived the fall and was finished by the island itself. No official records explain what truly happened. Once again, history stayed silent. After that, the hospital closed. The island was abandoned. Completely, no permanent residence, no development, no permission to visit freely. Even today, access to Poveglia is restricted, not by law alone, but by fear. Fishermen avoid the waters. Venetians lower their voices when the island is mentioned. And those who claim to have visited illegally tell the same story. The island feels wrong, heavy, watching. Poveglia is not frightening because of ghosts. It is frightening because of memory, because it collected suffering from multiple centuries. Disease, isolation, madness, death, all in one place. And that leads to the final question. Is Poveglia haunted, or is it simply a place where too much human pain was left behind? Because some places are not cursed by spirits. They are cursed by history. And Poveglia Island is one of them. In December 1872, a ship was found drifting in the Atlantic Ocean. It was not damaged. It was not sinking. Its sails were partially raised. Its cargo was intact. Its food and water were still on board. But there was one impossible problem. There was no one on it. The ship's name was Mary Celeste, and it remains one of the greatest mysteries in maritime history. Mary Celeste had left New York a month earlier, bound for Italy. On board were 10 souls. The captain, Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their young daughter, and 7 experienced crew members. They were not explorers. They were not desperate men. They were professionals, and nothing suggested danger. Then on December 5th, another ship spotted Mary Celeste drifting silently. No signals, no movement, no response. When sailors boarded her, they found a scene that made no sense. The ship was in good condition. The cargo of alcohol was untouched. Personal belongings were neatly arranged. Clothes were still folded. Pipes, tools, and navigation instruments were there. Even food was still prepared. It looked like the crew had simply stood up and walked away. The only thing missing was the lifeboat, and that detail changed everything. Because abandoning a ship like Mary Celeste made no sense. She was seaworthy. She was not on fire. She was not sinking. Leaving her would have been more dangerous than staying aboard. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no damage, no evidence of piracy. The logbook ended suddenly, with nothing unusual recorded, and the ocean around the ship was calm. So the questions began. Why would an entire crew abandon a perfectly functional ship? Why take the lifeboat into open ocean? Why leave behind food, money, and shelter? Why leave behind the child? Over the years, theories exploded. Some claimed pirates attacked, but pirates would have taken the cargo. Others said the crew mutinied, but there was no violence. Some blamed alcohol fumes causing panic. Others spoke of sea quakes or sudden storms. But none of these explanations fully fit the evidence. Then there were darker ideas, stories of sea monsters, ghost ships, cursed voyages. But history offers something more terrifying than fantasy. What if panic was enough? What if the crew believed something terrible was about to happen? What if they heard an explosion, smelled fumes, or misread a threat, and made one fatal decision to leave safety behind? Because the ocean does not forgive mistakes. Once they left the ship, they were at the mercy of the sea. No bodies were ever found. No lifeboat, no message, nothing. Mary Celeste was brought back to shore, investigated, cleared of wrongdoing, but the mystery stayed alive, and the ship never escaped its reputation. Crew members later refused to sail on her. Owners changed her name, but fate followed. In 1885, Mary Celeste was deliberately wrecked, as if even history wanted to silence her. And that leaves us with one final question. What makes experienced sailors abandon a ship that could save their lives? Because sometimes, the greatest horror is not monsters, but fear. A moment of panic, a single decision, and the ocean, waiting silently. History doesn't always end with answers. Sometimes it ends with silence. Oak Island is still there, still digging, still taking lives, still refusing to explain itself. And maybe that's the point, because some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to warn us. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden horrors of history, don't forget to like this video. It really helps the channel. Subscribe if you want more true stories that history tried to bury. And leave a comment below. Do you think Oak Island hides treasure or a curse? Because the past is never as dead as we think, and the next secret is even darker. Subscribe, like, stay curious.